Dr. Lloyd, do I always agree with you? Yes. Dr. Bill Lloyd, stay with me. Help me out, Dr. Lloyd.
Dr. Bill Lloyd, I want to ask you, based on what we just heard from Don, the fact that this apparently happened, this cocaine use, soon before her drowning and her death, how long normally, or to have that kind of an effect?
Sure, the effects of cocaine last minutes, the toxic effects of cocaine. It'll be important to know how long was she off of cocaine before she started again the day she died. In fact, had she been clean for a while and then just started up again, she would have been a cocaine virgin. Rita, that's like asking somebody to get out and sprint a mile who's not in good physical conditioning. Sadly, it could have just been one single hit, one fatal hit that could have caused those changes that you heard about in the blood vessel, starving the heart, causing an arrhythmia, leading to her being unconscious. Down she goes.
Dr. Bill Lloyd, stay with me.
We also know that when they found her, she was in the room for a long period of time. It seems like some before, and obviously her body was there a long time after, right?
We know for about 8 hours after the time that she expired, she remained in the room. The remains remained in the room for about 8 hours until they removed them and take them to the coroner's office. All the while, the big Clive Davis party was going on downstairs in the Beverly Hills Hilton. Now, we know also that Whitney Houston had pledged to go back into rehab the week after the Grammy. And we also know that addicts, knowing they're heading into rehab, tend to binge.
Dr. Bill Lloyd, what, if anything, forensically can we get from that cell phone and from the clothing neatly folded in that Juicy Couture pocketbook?
Any questions about that Juicy Couture bag? The police tell us that they've confirmed that the contents of the bag belonged to Sierra, but the mother says she hasn't seen the contents. So how did they confirm it? The garments could be soiled, there could be blood, there could be other forms of trace evidence there. Hair, for example, some dried seminal fluid, etc., that could be vital in tracking down a perpetrator.
Dr. Bill Lloyd, stay with me. To you, Dr. Bill Lloyd, board-certified surgeon and pathologist joining us out of Sacramento, you know, when you have a cut or an injury, only when that skin starts to grow back together is it too late to do stitches.
Not necessarily, Nancy. If the wound is contaminated, and there's a story here that there was a tussle on the lawn, then there could be germs, dirt, and debris in the wound, and the physician may have decided, let's just thoroughly irrigate it and clean this and let the wound heal by what we call secondary intent.
Okay, I don't know what that means.
Let nature take its own course. We cut ourselves all the time, and we don't go to the hospital. You wait long enough, it'll heal on its own. Put a Band-Aid over it, and tissue will come together on its own.
Dr. Lloyd, do I always agree with you? Yes. To Dr. Bill Lloyd, board-certified surgeon pathologist, Dr. Lloyd, what would you expect from a broken nose?
Well, it's very interesting, Nancy. With this case, we're getting new nuggets of information every day. Some from the police, some from the media, some from family members. This story continues to evolve. With regard specifically to a broken nose, you don't necessarily have to have bleeding. You can have damage to the nose and not have bleeding. Not long ago, Kobe Bryant suffered a broken nose and continued to play in the game. So you can't make an absolute judgment based on that video whether or not the gentleman had a broken nose.
Dr. Lloyd, do I always agree with you? Yes. Very quickly, Dr. Bill Lloyd, with a broken nose, wouldn't that show up in an x-ray?
Interestingly, a broken nose is not a broken bone, Nancy. It's only cartilage, and there may not be significant changes on x-ray. It requires an examination, typically by an ENT specialist. But the important point that you raised, Nancy, are the facts. We have to wait for all the facts and not have them dribbling to us in piecemeal fashion. We're Americans, and the final 3 words of the Pledge of Allegiance are justice for all.
Dr. Lloyd, do I always agree with you? Yes. To Dr. Bill Lloyd, very quickly, what do you make of this injury on this enhanced video, Bill?
Nancy, once again, the story has changed. Friday, he didn't have injuries. Today, he has hemorrhage, a laceration, head trauma, and who knows what else because they didn't get him to the hospital.
Dr. Bill Lloyd, stay with me. Joining me tonight, Dr. Bill Lloyd, board-certified surgeon and pathologist, joining us tonight out of Sacramento. What type of physical corroboration could there be in a case that happened many years ago with another high school student?
Nancy, without a physical exam, think back, 1998, what happened? The notorious blue dress with Monica Lewinsky. Now, we already hear that Hooker says that he became aroused when this young girl came out of the bathroom naked. And during the fondling, there may have been a release, there may be a semen stain somewhere, and it would have been well preserved since 1998. That's nothing. They could easily retrieve that DNA and make a conviction.
The doctor's right. The police are going to have to dig real deep for forensic evidence. Once they got that DNA match, case closed.
Dr. Lloyd, do I always agree with you? Yes. When you get that satellite up, let me know. It's so important, Dr. Bill Lloyd, that the forensics are handled perfectly in this case. What forensics do you expect, and why are they so crucial, Doctor?
2 important points. Gathering the information and processing the information has to be accurate and precise and properly handled. But just as important, Nancy, as you know from your career in the courtroom, is clearly communicating the science of the forensic evidence so that a jury can make a fair and impartial decision.
Dr. Bill Lloyd, stay with me. Dr. Bill Lloyd, regardless of tears behind bars, I think that forensics will carry the day in this case, one way or the other. What do you hope to learn from that autopsy report and from forensics reports, Doctor?
Nancy, the autopsy report are going to be able to tell us how close Trayvon and George were at the time the shooting happened. There'll be gunpowder residues and other chemicals on the body of Martin that will be able to assist in identifying precisely how close were they, and perhaps who was on top of whom when that gun was fired.
Dr. Lloyd, do I always agree with you? Yes. To be a registered nurse, doctor, what does it require? Or to be a licensed nurse, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's an important distinction, Nancy. A registered nurse has a bachelor's of nursing. They've done 4 years of college. An LVN is a licensed vocational nurse. Most of them have an associate's degree, 2 years of training. But a registered nurse is licensed, and there appears to be a lot of misinformation here. She's calling herself an RN, but everybody else says no, she's simply a licensed vocational nurse.
Do I always agree with you? Yes. Dr. Lloyd, as a matter of fact, when paramedics and police were there at the scene, they may very well not have known how many shots she sustained. Why?
Well, because some of the bullets may have entered her body and not left. Being fully clothed, it'd be very difficult to count the number of entry and exit wounds. So they were mostly concerned, obviously, about saving her life and CPR. But added to those bullet wounds, Nancy, being struck by that Lexus as the woman was pulling out of the parking lot was the crowning blow.
Why do you say that?
Because on top of the internal injuries and the massive bleeding caused by the gunshot wounds, the damage caused by being struck by a car, head trauma, skull fractures, neck and spine injuries could make it incompatible with life.
Do I always agree with you? Yes, 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 yes. To Dr. Bill Lloyd, board-certified surgeon pathologist, Dr. Lloyd, if the remains are found, what do you expect we can learn from them? And what condition will they be in?
It depends if the remains were placed in an open space, buried in soil, or buried in concrete. Concrete is a very chemically active substance, and remains buried in concrete are often difficult to work with. But if in soil or left in an open space, they will be able to extract DNA, confirm identity. You know, a young child age 6 or 7 is gaining teeth and losing teeth, so it'll be an easy matter there also to confirm the presence of Aton Pates.
Dr. Bill Lloyd, stay with me, stay with me, stay with me. When you have a head wound, does it bleed more than other parts of the body around the face and the neck?
That's a great point, Nancy. You're absolutely right. The skin of the scalp and the face is the most richly vascularized tissue in the body. We've all bunked ourselves in the head and got a goose egg because the blood vessels are so numerous and so close to the surface of the skin. That dramatic photo shows a pool of blood near those 2 lacerations.
Let's stop. And remember, do I always agree with you? Yes, 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 yes. Help me out, Dr. Lloyd.